right in March of 2016. Nobody else was really thinking that, even though they lie and say they all knew he was going to win. But I go back to a conversation I had with him in 2015. You all are talking about him connecting with a mob, and I just sort of got chills listening to you talking about that, because I remember a conversation I had with him in 2015, and he said something along the lines of, those people out there, man, at those rallies, they love me. They would do anything for me. Sometimes I think they'd even kill for me. And I just stared at him for a second, and I was like, that's bad, Donald, right?
But
it's sort of like, you know how he talks. He goes, oh, yeah, that's bad. But there are so many things he said like that that suggested there was this really disturbing side to him, and nobody thought he was going to get elected, but obviously he did, and his worst instincts all came to play.
Well, but the question is, who is he? It's a big question. And what does he care about? And we found from our reporting in the 2 earlier books I did, Fear and Rage, you know what he cares about? Himself. And at one point, sitting in the Oval Office for the second book, I asked, what's the job of the president? Key question. And he said, oh, to protect the people. And if you look at his performance, he has protected or tried to protect Donald Trump, not the people. He's disconnected from that overall arching constitutional and moral responsibility that the president has. And what this reporting, we used to always come on your show, and you would kindly ask us, and we'd say, we're in a cave. We're writing a book. We're going back and really trying to find out what happened. And the discovery is that this is the epic collapse of a presidency. If you were talking about McConnell, McCarthy, they all have disdain for Trump. They know, everyone knows. But the only person who acted is General Milley. Said, I'm not going to let this happen. And he was a very dramatic moment when he calls in the people from the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon, the War Room, into his office. And this is when Pelosi has said, I'm worried about what Trump might do with nuclear weapons. And Milley calls these people in, 1-star generals or admirals, colonels, and he says, I am going to be involved. You call me before there's any military action that comes from anyone, including the president. You involve me in this process. And he literally goes around the room. Got it? Got it? Yes, sir. Got it? Got it? Got it. And people say, oh, he's trying to take over some of the commander-in-chief's power. No, what he is doing is setting in motion sensible precautions, and if you look at the procedures, which are top secret, he's supposed to be involved. And he's just saying, we're going to adhere to that process to protect the country from the kind of, we've lost sight of what nuclear weapons can do. We've gone back and looked at a little bit what happened in the Truman presidency when President Truman twice used nuclear weapons on Japan to end World War II. These weapons, this is the end of the world if it happens. And we danced around that edge. And I think when you look at all of this, all McConnell, McCarthy, Attorney General Barr, they're all kind of looking out for their own position. General Milley took action and put himself, and he was in this moment where he had practical responsibility. What are the calamities that can befall the United States? A war, particularly with China, the use of nuclear weapons, anybody, I mean, it is unthinkable.
He's going over routine procedures, but it's an extraordinary American moment, a national security emergency in his eyes and the eyes of others around him.
And General Milley has responded to the book saying everything he did was perfectly within the realm of his responsibility. He did what he had to do, he thought, to protect those relationships and to protect the country. Bob Costa, I want to go back to something that Bob Woodward touched on a few minutes ago, and that is the idea of President Trump running again. Nobody has looked at this man more closely than the two of you over the last several months. It's a question that hangs over the country right now. Will he run for president again? Could we be in for 4 more years of what we just went through with this drift toward authoritarianism? What will go into the former president's decision about whether he will run or not in 2024?
The Woodward method of reporting is to sit down with people for 5, 6, sometimes even 8 hours and bring them over or go over to their house. And we've been sitting down with people close to President Trump for many months now. And you start to hear a certain refrain from people who really know him, that he wants back, that he feels he has the political capital with his core supporters. He likes playing golf, and he jokes that he's off Twitter and he has more time. But this is someone who wants back into the presidency. And he believes the Republican Party is still very much in his grip, that people aren't going to war with him at the highest ranks of the party. And at this time, even though there are others out there with ambition, like Vice President Pence, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, it's President Trump who really wants back, based on our own reporting.
And if I may say, wants back, and if you get into the question, which is important, to do what? And the answer is to be Donald Trump. And that is not an agenda. That does not connect to the needs of the people in the country. And his disconnection from that, I mean, the struggle that people are engaged in, he has no idea. And again, you know, the power of the presidency is so great. Good things can be done. Good things have been done to mobilize that power and make sure that it's going to be in the interest of the people in the country. And, you know, I think I would argue, I mean, it also is true that this book is not a partisan harangue in any way. It is something where Democrats, Republicans, people on the left, people on the right can say, what did he do with the presidency? Why were there so many people who held him in disdain, you know, they would checkmate him because he would have very bad ideas, even bad ideas for him.
That's right.
Yeah, everybody, almost everybody you talk to in the Republican Party held him in disdain, but he had the power, so they sat back quietly and went along with him. I want to ask you guys about the events of January the 6th inside the White House. We, of course, have reporting from another book that Melania Trump was begged to write something, calling off the mobs, asking them to go home, and she steadfastly refused. Also, we've heard from Republican senators that Trump was gleefully watching the riots, watching the police
and other family members
getting
too.
beaten up. Other family members were gleefully watching the police being beaten up and battered with American flags, and Trump was gleeful about it. Take us inside the White House that day and talk about the people begging the president to turn it off, and the people who were going along with the president and celebrating police being brutalized and the Capitol being sacked.
Based on our reporting, Joe, the scene was colder. It was almost an empty West Wing. The rally had ended.